If someone had told me a midnight spill on the floor would reroute a millionaire CEO's life, I would have blamed the intern. Imagine being so shattered by grief you forget how to smile. Avery Sterling, a millionaire CEO, hasn't smiled in a decade, not since her wife died. The empire flourishes, but her heart stays frozen. Then a janitor steps into her world and everything begins to shift. Before we dive into this emotional journey, please subscribe to the channel, tap the notification bell, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The elevator rose to the 47th floor. Inside, Avery Sterling stood motionless, her reflection icy in the polished steel. I watched Avery Sterling from beyond the glass walls of her corner office, and, truthfully, she terrified everyone. She was a machine, pure ice. She occupied that massive mahogany desk like a queen on her throne, signing multi-million-dollar contracts without a blink. Her black Armani suit was immaculate, hair pulled back so tight it could cut glass. And those eyes, gray as a winter storm, cold as Arctic wind. "Ma'am, the quarterly reports," her assistant whispered, sliding the pages across the desk as if feeding a dangerous animal. Avery didn't look up. Just signed. "Next paper." "Sign." "Next paper." "Sign." The assistant practically tiptoed out, shoulders hunched like she'd escaped a predator's den. I'd been working security in this building for 3 years, and I'd never, not once, seen Avery Sterling smile. Hell, I'd never seen her show any emotion at all. She was like a beautiful robot programmed for corporate domination. "She's been like that since her wife died," whispered Paula from accounting as we rode the elevator together 10 years ago. "Cancer. They say Avery used to be different before, warmer, human even." The elevator dinged. 47th floor. Avery was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows now, staring out at the city like she owned it. Which, let's be honest, she pretty much did. Sterling Industries had its fingers in everything. Real estate, tech, pharmaceuticals, green energy. The woman was worth more than some small countries. But money couldn't buy what she'd lost. Her phone buzzed. She answered without emotion, without warmth, without anything resembling human feeling. "Sterling." Her voice was sharp enough to cut steel. "No, fire him. I don't care about his family situation. Results matter, not excuses." She hung up. Went back to staring at the city like it had personally offended her. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. On her desk, turned away from visitors, but visible from where I stood in the hallway, was a small silver frame. Even from here, I could see it held a photo of 2 women laughing together. One was Avery, but a Avery I'd never seen, smiling, eyes bright with joy, alive. The other woman had kind eyes and curly brown hair, the kind of face that looked like it laughed easily. Avery's fingers drummed against the window. Once, twice, a nervous habit that seemed out of place on someone so controlled. Then she turned around and for just a split second, I swear I saw something crack in that perfect mask of hers. Something raw and painful and desperately human, but it was gone so fast I might have imagined it. She walked back to her desk with measured steps, picked up the silver frame, and placed it face down with the careful precision of someone performing surgery. "Security," she called through her intercom, her voice flat and professional. "I want the cleaning crew changed. The current one is inadequate." My heart sank. The cleaning crew had been with us for years. Good people, hard workers. Elena had 3 kids and was putting her oldest through college. Jack was saving up for his daughter's wedding, but Avery Sterling had spoken, and when Avery Sterling spoke, people listened or they got fired. The next morning, I watched her arrive at exactly 7 a.m. like clockwork. Same black Mercedes. Same driver who never got a thank you or even acknowledgement. Same cold expression as she walked through the lobby in her designer heels. Each step echoing like a judge's gavel. People literally stepped aside to let her pass. Conversation stopped. Eyes followed her with a mixture of respect and fear. She was untouchable, unreachable, a woman who'd forgotten how to be human. Employees whispered stories about her legendary coldness. How she'd fired an entire department for missing a deadline. How she'd never attended a single company party or employee gathering. How she worked 16-hour days and expected everyone else to do the same. "She's not evil," Paula had told me once, "she's just empty." Like someone scooped out everything soft and warm and left only the sharp edges. I watched Avery disappear into the elevator. Her face a mask of professional indifference. But I couldn't shake the image of that photograph. The laughing woman with bright eyes who looked nothing like the ice queen who ruled this building. What had happened to that Avery? What kind of love could transform someone so completely? And what kind of loss could destroy them so thoroughly? The elevator doors closed, carrying her up to her glass tower, where she ruled over her empire of steel and silence. But what none of us knew, what Avery herself didn't know, was that everything was about to change. Because tomorrow a new janitor would start working the night shift. And this janitor was different. This janitor smiled. This janitor saw beauty in ordinary moments and believed in the power of human connection. This janitor was about to walk into Avery Sterling's carefully constructed world of gray and bring color back to a woman who'd forgotten what it looked like. The storm was coming and Avery Sterling had no idea that her perfectly ordered life was about to be turned completely upside down by a woman with honey blonde hair and a smile that could melt glaciers. Change was coming whether she wanted it or not. And for the first time in 10 years, Avery Sterling was about to remember what it felt like to be alive. I was doing my usual evening rounds when I first saw her. Quinn Hart. That's what her name tag said. She was maybe 5 feet 4 inches with honey blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail and the kind of smile that could light up a morgue. She was humming, actually humming while she mopped the lobby floor, moving to some internal rhythm like she was dancing instead of working. Who the hell hums while mopping ing? She called out when she saw me, her voice bright and genuinely cheerful. Beautiful night, isn't it? I looked outside through the glass doors. It was raining. Hard. The kind of cold October downpour that puts everyone in a sour mood. Sure, I said, thrown by her cheer. She laughed, bright, genuine, ringing through the empty lobby like music. I know. People think I'm nuts, but rain waters the plants, and tomorrow the air will smell fresh and clean. Plus, the city lights look magical in the puddles. I just stared. 3 years in this building and I'd never heard anyone talk about plants, fresh air, or magic. Mostly it was complaints, the weather, the hours, the pay, the commute. You're new, I said, obvious as a fire alarm. First night. She dipped her mop, wrung it out with practiced ease. Quinn Hart, professional floor shiner and part-time optimist. Part-time? Well, full-time optimism would be exhausting for everyone else. People need time to adjust to this much sunshine. I actually smiled. When was the last time that happened at work? When was the last time anyone made me smile in this building? Fair enough. I'm Ethan. Security. Nice to meet you, Ethan. She slid to the next stretch of floor, still humming a tune I didn't recognize. So, what's the story with the Ice Queen upstairs? My smile thinned. Ice Queen. The CEO. Avery Sterling. I saw her picture in the lobby directory. She looks like she could freeze hell over with one glance. Very intimidating, very untouchable. She's intense, I said. You never knew who was listening in this place. The walls had ears, and Avery Sterling had a way of knowing everything that happened in her building. Quinn paused her mopping, leaning on the handle thoughtfully. Intense, how? Like, scary intense or sad intense? The question caught me off guard. Sad intense? I'd never thought of Avery that way, but now that Quinn mentioned it, both, I guess. Quinn nodded thoughtfully. Like, this made perfect sense. Those are usually the people who need kindness the most. The ones who've forgotten what it feels like to be seen as human instead of just powerful. Before I could respond, the elevator dinged. Avery Sterling stepped out at 9 p.m. She never stayed this late. Avery was notorious for her rigid schedule. Arrive at 7, leave at 6. No exceptions. Quinn looked up from her mop, and I held my breath. Avery's eyes swept the lobby, taking in the wet floors, the cleaning cart, and finally landing on Quinn with laser focus. For a moment, nobody moved. The air felt charged, like right before lightning strikes. Then Quinn did something that made my heart stop. She smiled. Not a nervous employee meeting the boss smile, not a fake customer service smile. A real smile, warm and genuine, and completely unafraid. Good evening, Miss Sterling, Quinn said cheerfully, like she was greeting an old friend. Sorry about the wet floors. I'll have this cleaned up in just a few minutes. Avery stared at her. Just stared. I could see the wheels turning in that sharp mind of hers. She was probably calculating how to fire Quinn on the spot for being too cheerful, too human, too alive. But instead, Avery just nodded once, a sharp, efficient movement, and walked toward the exit. Have a wonderful evening, Quinn called after her, her voice carrying genuine warmth. Avery's step faltered just for a second, like she'd been hit by something unexpected. Then she was gone, disappearing into the rain and the night. Quinn went back to mopping, humming again like nothing had happened. "She seems nice," she said casually. I nearly choked. "Nice. Lonely," Quinn corrected, wringing out her mop. "But nice. You can tell by the eyes. They're not cold. They're just protected. Like someone who's been hurt really badly and doesn't want to risk it again." The next few nights, I started paying attention. Quinn worked the 47th floor on Wednesdays and Fridays. And somehow Avery always seemed to be working late on those nights. Coincidence? Maybe. But I'd been in security long enough to know that Avery Sterling didn't believe in coincidences. On Friday night, I watched through the security cameras as Quinn cleaned the executive floor. She moved through the offices like she was dancing, earbuds in, occasionally stopping to straighten a picture or water a plant that someone had forgotten. She talked to the plants. Actually talked to them. "Looking a little droopy there, buddy," I heard her say to a ficus in the corner. "When's the last time someone gave you some love?" At 10:30 p.m., Avery's office door opened. She stood there for a moment, watching Quinn work through the glass walls of the conference room. Quinn didn't notice at first. She was focused on cleaning the windows, singing softly to herself. Something about sunshine and better days. Then she turned around and jumped. "Oh, Sterling, I'm sorry. I didn't hear you come out." Avery didn't say anything. Just stood there in her perfect suit, looking at this woman who seemed to glow with some inner light that Avery had forgotten existed. "I can come back later if you need to." "No," Avery said quietly. "Continue." And then, and I swear this happened, Avery sat down in one of the conference room chairs and just watched. Quinn went back to cleaning, but I could see she was nervous now. Her movements were less fluid, more careful. The easy confidence had been replaced by awareness. "You don't have to watch me work," Quinn said gently. "I promise I won't steal anything." "Well, maybe a pen if it's really nice, but nothing major." "I'm not worried about theft," Avery replied, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "Then what?" Avery was quiet for so long, I thought she wouldn't answer. Finally, "I'm trying to remember what it looks like." "What? What looks like?" "Contentment." Quinn stopped cleaning, turned to face Avery fully, her expression gentle and understanding. "You want to know the secret?" Quinn asked. Avery raised an eyebrow, the first real expression I'd seen from her in years. "It's not about being happy all the time. That's exhausting and fake. It's about finding something beautiful in the ordinary moments." Like Quinn gestured to the window, the way the city lights reflect in the rain. Or how this building feels different at night, quieter, more peaceful, like it's sleeping. Avery followed her gaze to the window and for a moment her mask slipped. "I used to see beauty in things," Avery said so quietly I almost missed it through the camera audio. "What happened?" Avery stood up abruptly. "I should let you work." She walked toward her office, then stopped. "Quinn." "Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the perspective." And then Avery Sterling did something that made me question everything I thought I knew about her. She almost smiled. Not quite, but almost. Quinn beamed like she'd just won the lottery. "Anytime, Miss Sterling. Anytime." I should have known something was different when Avery started arriving at the office with coffee. Not just any coffee, good coffee, the expensive kind from that little cafe down the street that charged $8 for a latte and somehow made it worth every penny. But she wasn't drinking both cups. Every morning for a week, I watched her carry 2 cups up to the 47th floor through the security cameras. She'd drink one and leave the other on the reception desk outside her office like an offering to some invisible deity. The day shift cleaning crew thought it was for them. They were wrong. The coffee sat there all day growing cold until Quinn arrived for her evening shift. It was Thursday night when everything changed. I was reviewing security footage when I heard the crash. 47th floor conference room. The sound of ceramic shattering, liquid splashing, papers scattering. I grabbed my radio and headed for the elevator. But by the time I got there, I could hear voices through the glass doors. "Oh God. Oh God. I'm so sorry." Quinn's voice was panicked, higher than usual. I peered around the corner and saw chaos. Coffee everywhere. Dark liquid spreading across Avery's white silk blouse, dripping onto her perfectly pressed skirt. Papers scattered across the floor, some soaked through with coffee, others floating like lily pads in brown puddles. Quinn was on her hands and knees, frantically trying to clean up the mess with paper towels that were completely inadequate for the disaster zone. Avery stood frozen in the middle of it all, coffee dripping from her clothes, her hair slightly mused for the first time since I'd known her. "I'm so sorry, Miss Sterling. I didn't see you come in and I turned around too fast with the coffee cart and the wheel caught on the carpet." "And stop," Avery said quietly. Quinn froze, still on the floor, looking up at Avery with wide, terrified eyes. "Just stop." I expected Avery to explode, to fire Quinn on the spot, to unleash that legendary Sterling fury that had made grown men cry and sent entire departments scrambling for cover. Instead, she did something that made my jaw drop. She laughed. Not a big laugh, just a small surprise sound that seemed to escape before she could stop it. But it was the first time I'd heard Avery Sterling laugh in 3 years. "It's just coffee," Avery said, looking down at her ruined outfit with something that might have been amusement. "And honestly, this blouse was uncomfortable anyway, too tight in the shoulders." Quinn looked up from the floor, eyes wide with disbelief. You're not firing me for spilling coffee?" "No." Avery stepped carefully around the puddle, her expensive heels squelching slightly, "though I might need to borrow a shirt. I have a spare uniform in my locker." Quinn offered quickly, scrambling to her feet. It's not silk or anything fancy, but it's clean." "That would be perfect." 20 minutes later, I watched through the security cameras as Avery Sterling, CEO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation, walked through her office wearing a janitor's uniform. It was surreal. The gray polo shirt was too big for her, hanging loose on her slender frame. The pants were too short, showing her expensive ankles above sensible work shoes Quinn had lent her. But somehow she looked more human than I'd ever seen her. More real. Quinn had insisted on staying late to help clean up the mess, even though Avery told her it wasn't necessary. "I made the mess. I cleaned the mess," Quinn had said firmly. "That's the rule." So there they were at midnight, both on their hands and knees, scrubbing coffee stains out of the conference room carpet. "You know," Quinn said, sitting back on her heels, "this is probably the most fun I've had at work in months." Avery looked at her like she'd spoken in a foreign language. "Fun? Yeah. I mean, when's the last time you got to do something normal, something messy and imperfect and completely unplanned?" Avery considered this, her hands stilled on the carpet. "I don't do messy. Maybe you should try it sometime." "Why?" Quinn shrugged, going back to scrubbing. "Because perfect is exhausting and lonely, and because sometimes the best moments happen when everything goes wrong." Avery's hand stilled completely now. "I saw the photo," Quinn said gently, not looking up from the stain. "On your desk. She was beautiful." I watched Avery's face through the camera. For a moment, her carefully constructed mask slipped completely, revealing something raw and vulnerable underneath. "She was," Avery whispered. "What was her name?" "Lila." The name came out like a prayer, like something sacred. "Her name was Lila." "Tell me about her." Avery was quiet for so long, I thought she wouldn't answer. Then slowly, she began to speak. She laughed at everything. Bad movies, my terrible cooking, her own jokes that weren't even funny. She saw joy in the smallest things, a perfect cup of coffee, sunsets, the way snow looked on the windowsill. Quinn smiled, still scrubbing. "She sounds wonderful." She was. And when she died, Avery's voice broke slightly. The world lost its color. Everything became gray. Food had no taste. Music had no melody. Even the sunrise looked like just even coffee. Avery looked at the stain they were cleaning, especially coffee. "She used to make it for me every morning. Said it was her way of saying good morning without words." "Is that why you've been bringing 2 cups to work?" Avery's eyes snapped up to meet Quinn's. "You noticed?" "I notice everything. It's a gift and a curse." Avery sat back, no longer pretending to clean. "I don't know why I do it. Habit maybe, or hope that somehow that she'll be there to drink it with you." "Yes." Quinn reached over and gently touched Avery's hand. "She's not gone, you know." "Not really. She's in every kind thing you do. Every moment of beauty you choose to see. Every time you let yourself feel something other than pain." Avery stared at their joined hands. "I don't remember how to feel anything else." "Then maybe it's time to learn again." Avery looked up at Quinn. Really looked at her. And for the first time in 10 years, I saw something other than ice in Avery Sterling eyes. I saw a possibility. "The coffee," Avery said suddenly. "Tomorrow morning. Would you? Would you like to share it with me?" Quinn's face lit up like Christmas morning. I'd love that. Avery almost smiled. Almost. But it was closer than she'd come in a decade. And as I watched them finish cleaning up the mess together, I realized something had shifted in that conference room tonight. Something that couldn't be cleaned up or put back the way it was. Something that looked a lot like hope. The coffee stain never truly vanished. A faint brown shadow lingered on the carpet, barely noticeable unless you knew exactly where to glance. Avery never replaced it. Some stains, I realized, are worth keeping. Some messes are worth making. And sometimes the most beautiful things happen only after everything falls apart. I wasn't supposed to be in Avery's office, but she'd asked me to water her plants while she was tied up in meetings all day. And, honestly, I was curious. She was a mystery wrapped in immaculate suits and colder stares. After our coffee conversation yesterday morning, God, that had been nice, I wanted to understand her better. Her office looked exactly as you'd expect, minimalist, sharp lines, every object arranged with near military order. Except for one corner. Tucked where visitors wouldn't see stood a small bookshelf, and it was intimate. Deeply personal. Paperbacks with worn spines and dog-eared pages. A chipped ceramic mug. A dried flower pressed between glass as if it were a relic. And photos. So many photos. I knew I shouldn't. It felt private, almost sacred. But I couldn't stop myself. The first picture knocked the breath out of me, Avery and Lila on what had to be their wedding day. Both in white, laughing as they smeared cake on each other's faces. Avery was radiant, truly glowing. Not the Avery I knew. This Avery was alive, open, joyful. The next showed them on a beach somewhere tropical. Lila built a sand castle while Avery watched, her expression soft with love, completely unguarded. Then a camping shot, Lila toasting marshmallows while Avery wrestled with a tent, both filthy and grinning like teenagers. Christmas morning, Lila in pajamas, drowning in wrapping paper, holding up a spectacularly terrible homemade scarf. Avery was laughing so hard she was crying, doubled over with delight. In every single photo, Avery was smiling, real, whole, incandescent. She made that scarf. I spun, heart ramming my ribs. Avery stood in the doorway, unreadable. I'm sorry, I blurted, stepping away from the shelf. I was watering the plants, and I saw, it's okay. She stepped inside and closed the door with a soft click. I don't usually let people see those. I shouldn't have looked. But you did. She came to stand beside me, eyes on the frames. What do you see? I studied her profile, trying to read the weather behind her calm. I see love, I said. Real love. The kind that changes everything. Avery lifted the Christmas photo, her thumb tracing Lila's face with infinite care. She spent 3 months knitting that scarf. It was hideous, lumpy, uneven, absolutely the wrong color. But you kept it. I wore it every winter for 5 years until, her voice thinned. Until she got sick. Avery nodded, setting the picture down as if it might break. Cancer. Pancreatic. By the time they found it, it was everywhere. Stage 4. Terminal. There was nothing useful to say. Not, I'm sorry for your loss, not, time heals, not any of the empty phrases people use when they can't bear the silence. So I stayed quiet. She was sick for 8 months, Avery went on, her tone steady but hollow. 8 months of treatments and hospitals and hope that kept getting smaller and smaller. She picked up another photo. Lila in a hospital bed, bald from chemo, but still smiling, still radiant. The last month, she couldn't get out of bed. But she still tried to make me coffee every morning. Her hands would shake so badly she could barely hold the cup. But she insisted. She loved you. She did. And I loved her more than I thought it was possible to love another person. Avery sat down heavily in her chair, suddenly looking exhausted, like the weight of the memories was crushing her. After she died, people kept telling me I'd move on, that I'd find someone else, that Lila would want me to be happy. But you didn't believe them. How could I? Lila wasn't just my wife. She was my best friend, my partner, the person who made me want to be better than I was. How do you replace that? I perched on the edge of her desk, careful not to disturb anything. Maybe you don't replace it. Maybe you just make room for something different. Avery looked at me sharply. Different how? I don't know. I've never lost someone like that. But I think love doesn't have to be the same every time. It can be quieter or different or what? I took a deep breath. Or maybe it's not about finding another Lila. Maybe it's about letting yourself be the person Lila fell in love with again. Avery was quiet for a long time, staring at the photos. I don't remember who that person was, she said finally. I think you do. I think she's still in there. Just scared. Scared of what? Of feeling that much again. Of risking that kind of loss. Avery's laugh was bitter. Hollow. Smart fear. Maybe. But Lila didn't love you because you were safe. She loved you because you were brave enough to love her back. Avery looked at me then. Really? Looked at me. When did you become so wise? I'm not wise. I'm just observant. And I've been watching you. Watching me? I felt my cheeks heat up. Not in a creepy way. You're different than people think you are. How so? You leave coffee for people. You notice when the security guard looks tired and you make sure there's fresh coffee in the break room. You approved overtime pay for the cleaning crew during the holidays even though corporate said no. Avery frowned. How do you know about that? Because I pay attention and because you're not as cold as you pretend to be. I'm not pretending. Yes, you are. You're hiding. There's a difference. Avery stood up abruptly, walking to the window. The afternoon sun caught her profile, highlighting the sharp angles of her face, the tension in her shoulders. What if I don't want to stop hiding? Then that's your choice. But Lila, I gestured to the photos. She wouldn't want you to disappear. You didn't know her. No, but I know love. And love wants the person it loves to live. Really live. Not just exist. Avery pressed her forehead against the glass, her breath fogging the window. It's been 10 years, Quinn. 10 years of gray. I don't know if I remember how to see color anymore. I stood up, walking over to stand beside her. Then maybe we start small. Small how? I pointed out the window. What do you see? Avery sighed. Buildings, traffic, people rushing around like ants. Look again. She did, her brow furrowed in concentration. The sunset, she said slowly. It's orange and pink. And there's a couple walking hand in hand down there. She's laughing at something he said. And Avery's voice grew softer. And there's a little girl feeding pigeons in Ginkgo Park. Her mother is watching her, smiling. Color, I said gently. It's still there. You just have to choose to see it. Avery turned to look at me, and for a moment, I saw a crack in that perfect armor of hers. What if I'm not ready? Then we wait. But Avery. I reached out and gently touched her arm. Lila loved you. That love doesn't just disappear because she's gone. It becomes part of who you are. And maybe it's time to let that love teach you how to live again. Avery stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the war raging in her eyes. Then slowly she almost smiled. Coffee tomorrow? She asked. Coffee tomorrow. I agreed. And as I left her office that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something important had just happened, something that felt a lot like a beginning. The storm hit at 8 p.m. just as I was finishing up the executive floor. Rain hammered against the windows like bullets, and the wind howled so loud it made the whole building shake. The lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in an eerie red glow. My phone buzzed with a text from building management. All personnel evacuate immediately. Severe weather warning in effect. Power grid compromised. But as I gathered my cleaning supplies, I realized something that made my stomach drop. Avery's office light was still on. She was still here. I should have left. Should have followed protocol and gotten out of the building like everyone else. The elevators were probably down. The security systems offline. Instead, I found myself knocking on her office door. Miss Sterling, are you okay in there? The door opened and Avery appeared, looking frazzled for the first time since I'd known her. Her perfect hair was mussed. Her suit jacket was off, and she was holding her phone like it had personally offended her. The elevators are down, she said without preamble. Security system is offline. We're locked in until the power comes back. How long will that be? Could be hours, maybe all night. I looked around the dark hallway, lit only by the red emergency lights. Well, this is cozy. Avery stared at me. You're not panicking. Should I be? Most people would be. I shrugged. I've been through worse. Besides, we have food in the break room, water, and I gestured to her office. Comfortable chairs. Could be worse. How is this not worse? We could be stuck in the elevator. Avery actually shuddered. Point taken. The building shook again as another gust of wind hit it, rattling the windows like they might shatter. "Come on," I said, making a decision. "Let's set up camp in your office. It's got the best view, and if we're going to be stuck here all night, we might as well be comfortable." An hour later, we'd created the world's most expensive fort. I'd raided the break room for snacks and bottled water while Avery found some emergency candles in the supply closet. We'd pushed her couch and chairs together, creating a little seating area by the windows. It was almost cozy. "I can't remember the last time I sat on the floor," Avery said, settling cross-legged on the carpet with a bag of pretzels. "Really? Really? Lila used to make us have picnics in the living room sometimes. Said it was more fun than eating at the table." This was the first time Avery had mentioned Lila without looking like she was in physical pain. "She sounds like she knew how to have fun." She did. She was always trying to get me to loosen up. "Life's too short to be serious all the time." "Avery," she said, mimicking what must have been Lila's voice. "Learn to play." "Did you learn to play?" Avery was quiet for a moment, watching the storm rage outside. Lightning illuminated the clouds in brilliant flashes, turning the sky into a light show. For a while, when I was with her, everything felt lighter, like the world was full of possibilities instead of problems. "What kind of things did you do together?" "Silly things. We'd have dance parties in the kitchen while cooking dinner. She'd leave little notes in my briefcase for me to find during meetings. Once she convinced me to play hooky from work so we could go to the zoo." "The zoo?" Avery's lips quirked up slightly. "She said I needed to remember what wonder felt like. So we spent the whole day watching penguins and eating overpriced ice cream." "And did you remember what wonder felt like?" "Yeah, I did." The candles flickered in the draft from the windows, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, the storm continued its assault on the city. "What about you?" Avery asked. "What makes you feel wonder?" I thought about it. "Storms, actually. I know that's weird, but there's something about the power of nature that just amazes me. All that energy and chaos, but somehow it creates something beautiful." "Like what?" "Like this." I gestured to the windows where lightning was illuminating the clouds in brilliant flashes. "Look at that. It's terrifying and gorgeous at the same time." Avery followed my gaze and I watched her face in the candlelight. For once, she wasn't thinking about quarterly reports or board meetings. She was just present. "I used to love storms," she said softly. "Lila and I would sit on our porch during thunderstorms and just watch. She'd make hot chocolate and we'd curl up together under a blanket." "What changed?" "She died during a storm like this. I was stuck at the office. Couldn't get to the hospital because of the weather. By the time I got there, Avery's voice broke slightly. She was already gone. My heart ached for her. Avery, I'm so sorry. I blamed myself for months. If I'd left work earlier, if I'd ignored the weather warnings. If I'd been there, she wouldn't have wanted you to blame yourself." "How do you know?" "Because love doesn't work that way. Love wants the person it loves to forgive themselves, to find peace." Avery was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face in the candlelight. "I miss her so much," she whispered. "Every day, every moment. I miss her laugh and her terrible cooking and the way she'd steal the covers at night." "Of course you do. That's what love is. But it hurts. It hurts so much that sometimes I can't breathe." I scooted closer to her on the carpet. "Can I tell you something?" She nodded. "My grandmother died when I was 15. She raised me after my parents died in a car accident. And when she got sick, I was angry. Angry at God. Angry at the world. Angry at her for leaving me." "What did you do?" "I stopped living. For 2 years, I just existed. Went through the motions. And then one day, I was cleaning out her house and I found a letter she'd written to me." "What did it say?" "It said that grief is love with nowhere to go. But that love doesn't disappear when someone dies. It transforms. It becomes the kindness we show others, the beauty we choose to see, the courage we find to keep living." Avery wiped her eyes. "That's beautiful." She was a wise woman and she was right. The love doesn't go away, Avery. It just changes shape. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the storm. The lightning was less frequent now, the thunder more distant. "Quinn." "Yeah. Thank you for staying for this. Thank you for letting me." Avery looked at me then. Really looked at me and something shifted in her expression. Something soft and vulnerable and real. "I haven't talked about Lila like this in years." She said, "It feels good. Scary, but good. Healing usually is." Another flash of lightning lit up the sky. And in that moment, Avery smiled. Not almost smiled. Not tried to smile. Actually smiled. It was small and tentative and absolutely beautiful. "There it is," I said softly. "What?" "Your smile." I was wondering what it looked like. Avery's hand flew to her mouth as if she could catch the smile and put it back where it came from. I didn't realize. "It's okay. It's good. I haven't smiled in 10 years. I know. Lila used to say I had a beautiful smile." She was right. Avery looked at me with wonder, like she was seeing me for the first time. "How do you do that?" she asked. "Do what?" "Make everything feel possible." I reached over and gently took her hand. "I don't make anything possible, Avery. I just remind you that it already is." The storm raged on outside. But inside Avery's office, surrounded by candlelight and the warmth of shared stories, something beautiful was beginning to bloom. Something that looked a lot like hope. And for the first time in 10 years, Avery Sterling was smiling. I knew something was wrong the moment I walked into the building Monday morning. Avery's coffee cups were gone. For 2 weeks, there had been 2 cups on the reception desk every morning. One for her, one for me. Our little ritual that had become the best part of my day. Now there was just one. And when I saw Avery later that day, she wouldn't meet my eyes. "Good evening, Miss Sterling," I said when she passed me in the hallway. She nodded curtly and kept walking, her heels clicking against the marble floor like a metronome. No smile, no warmth, nothing. It was like the storm night had never happened. I tried to tell myself it was nothing. Maybe she was just having a bad day. Maybe there was some crisis at work, some board meeting gone wrong. But deep down, I knew better. Avery Sterling was running scared. By Wednesday, I couldn't take it anymore. I waited until the building was empty, then knocked on her office door. "Come in." Avery was at her desk, buried in paperwork. She didn't look up when I entered, didn't acknowledge my presence at all. "Miss Sterling, if you're here about the cleaning schedule, speak to building management." Her voice was ice-cold, professional, distant. All the warmth we'd built over the past weeks had vanished like it never existed. "I'm not here about the cleaning schedule." "Then what?" "I'm here about you." That got her attention. She looked up and I saw something flicker in her eyes before the mask slammed back into place. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do." Avery set down her pen with deliberate precision. "Quinn, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "Has there?" "Yes." "What happened the other night?" "It was a mistake." The words hit me like a physical blow. "A mistake?" I was emotional, vulnerable. I said things I shouldn't have said. "You mean you told the truth?" "I mean, I forgot myself." Avery stood up, walking to the window with her back to me. "I forgot who I am, who you are, what this is, and what is this exactly?" "You're an employee. I'm your boss, that's all." I stared at her back, seeing the rigid line of her shoulders. The way she held herself like she was made of glass, and one wrong move would shatter her completely. "That's and you know it." Avery spun around. "Excuse me. You heard me. That's what happened between us wasn't about boss and employee. It was about 2 people connecting. 2 people who what?" Avery's voice was sharp, dangerous, who care about each other, who might have feelings for each other. "Is that what you were going to say?" "Yes." "Well, you're wrong." But I could see the lie in her eyes. Could see the fear behind the anger, the desperation behind the coldness. Am I? Because the woman I spent that night with, the woman who smiled for the first time in 10 years, she didn't seem to think it was a mistake. That woman doesn't exist anymore. She's standing right in front of me. Avery laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You don't understand. You don't know what you're asking." "Then tell me." "You want to know?" Avery's voice rose. "You want to know what you're asking? You're asking me to risk everything again. You're asking me to open my heart to someone who could leave, who could die, who could destroy me all over again." "Avery, no." She held up a hand. "You don't get it. When Lila died, I didn't just lose my wife. I lost myself. I lost my ability to function, to think, to breathe. For months, I couldn't get out of bed, couldn't eat, couldn't work. I almost lost everything. But you didn't because I learned to shut it off. All of it. The love, the hope, the possibility. I built walls so high that nothing could get in. Nothing could hurt me. And nothing could heal you either." Avery's laugh was bitter. "Healing is a luxury I can't afford. That's not living, Avery. That's just surviving." Surviving is enough. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're dying a little more every day. Avery flinched like I'd slapped her. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? I see you, Avery. Really? See you. And you're terrified. Not of me. Not of love. You're terrified of hope. Hope is dangerous. So is despair. We stared at each other across the office, the air crackling with tension. I could see the war raging in her eyes, the battle between what she wanted and what she thought she could survive. I can't do this, Avery said finally. I can't be what you want me to be. I don't want you to be anything other than who you are. You want me to be someone who can love again, someone who can take that risk. But I can't. I won't because of Lila. Because I couldn't survive losing someone like that again. I stepped closer to her. What if you didn't lose them? What if you found something beautiful instead? What if I did lose them? What if I let myself care and then they leave or get sick or die? What then? Then you'd have loved, really loved. And that would be worth it. Avery shook her head violently. Not to me. Lila wouldn't want this for you. Don't. Avery's voice was dangerous. Don't you dare tell me what Lila would want. She'd want you to live. She'd want you to be happy. She'd want me to be safe. No, she wouldn't because safe isn't living. Safe is just existing. Avery turned back to the window. This conversation is over, Avery. I said it's over. I want you to request a transfer to a different floor. I don't want to see you anymore. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. You don't mean that? I do. Look at me and say it. Avery's shoulders tensed, but she didn't turn around. Look at me, Avery. If you really want me gone, look me in the eye and tell me you feel nothing. For a long moment, she didn't move. I could see her reflection in the window. See the tears she was trying so hard to hold back. Then slowly, she turned around. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, and I could see the war raging inside her, the love fighting against the fear, the hope battling the despair. She started, then stopped. Say it, I whispered. Tell me you feel nothing. Avery opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I can't, she whispered. Because it's not true. Because it doesn't matter. Her voice broke. It doesn't matter what I feel. I can't do this. I won't. Avery, please. The word came out as a plea. Please just go before I do something we'll both regret. I stared at her for a long moment, seeing the pain and fear and longing all wearing in her expression. Okay, I said finally. I'll go, but Avery. She looked at me. When you're ready to stop running, you know where to find me. I turned and walked toward the door. Quinn. I stopped but didn't turn around. I'm sorry, she whispered. So am I said, and then I left. My heart breaking for both of us because I could see what Avery couldn't. She wasn't protecting herself from pain. She was drowning in it. And until she was ready to reach for the lifeline I was offering, there was nothing I could do but wait and hope that love would be stronger than fear. 3 weeks. 3 weeks of Avery avoiding me like I carried the plague. 3 weeks of single coffee cups and cold nods and the return of the ice queen everyone feared. 3 weeks of watching her slowly disappear back into the gray world she'd built around herself. I should have given up. Should have requested that transfer and moved on with my life. But I couldn't because I'd seen her smile. I'd seen the real Avery Sterling. The one who laughed at storms and talked about her wife with love instead of just pain. And I wasn't giving up on her. That's why I was standing outside her office at 11 p.m. on a Friday night, holding 2 cups of coffee and my heart in my throat. I knocked. Come in. Avery looked up from her computer and her face went through a series of emotions when she saw me. Surprise, longing, fear, and finally resignation. I thought I made myself clear, she said. You did crystal clear. I walked into the office and set one of the coffee cups on her desk. But I'm not here as your employee. Then what are you here as? Your friend. Avery stared at the coffee cup like it might bite her. I don't have friends. You have me. Quinn, just listen. Please. 5 minutes and then I'll leave you alone forever if that's what you really want. Avery was quiet for a long moment. Then she gestured to the chair across from her desk. I sat down, wrapping my hands around my coffee cup for courage. I've been thinking about what you said about not being able to survive losing someone again. Quinn, let me finish. You're right. Love is a risk. Caring about someone is dangerous. There are no guarantees. Avery's expression was guarded. Then why are you here? Because I realized something. You think you're protecting yourself by not loving again. But Avery, you're not protecting yourself. You're punishing yourself. That's not. It is. You're punishing yourself for surviving when Lila didn't. You're punishing yourself for being human enough to want connection again. You're punishing yourself for having the audacity to hope. Avery's hands clenched on her desk. You don't understand. I understand that you loved Lila with everything you had. I understand that losing her nearly destroyed you. But Avery, what you're doing now, this isn't honoring her memory. This is burying it. How dare you? Lila loved you, right? Really truly loved you. Yes. Then she loved your smile, your laugh, your capacity for joy. She loved the part of you that could see beauty in the world. Avery's eyes filled with tears. Yes. So, by refusing to smile, by refusing to laugh, by refusing to see beauty, you're not keeping her alive. You're killing the parts of yourself that she loved most. The tears spilled over now, streaming down Avery's face. I don't know how to do it differently, she whispered. Yes, you do. You showed me that night during the storm. You remembered how to be human again, for one night, at least. I leaned in. Avery, I'm not asking you to forget Lila. I'm not asking you to love me the way you loved her. I'm asking you to let yourself live again. What if I can't? What if you can? Avery scrubbed at her eyes with the back of her hand. What if I try and I fail? What if I hurt you? What if you try and it's beautiful? I said gently. Quinn, I know you're scared. I am. And so are you. But, Avery, I'd rather have one day of real love with you than a lifetime of safe emptiness with anyone else. She stared at me, and I could see the war behind her eyes. I don't know how to do this, she whispered at last. Neither do I. We'll learn together. What if? What if we stop asking what if and ask what now instead? Silence stretched. She kept her gaze on the coffee cup I'd brought. Lila used to say love isn't about finding someone perfect, she said finally. It's about finding someone worth fighting for. Smart woman. She was. Avery lifted her eyes to mine. She also said the heart has an infinite capacity for love. Loving someone new doesn't erase what you had before. Do you believe that? I want to. That's a start. Avery rose slowly and came around the desk to stand in front of me. If we do this, if we try, I need you to know I'm broken. I'm damaged. I have days I can't get out of bed. I have nightmares. I cry without warning. I'm not who I was before Lila died. I stood too and reached for her hands. I don't want who you were before. I want who you are now, broken pieces and all. Why? Because your broken pieces are beautiful. Because your scars tell a story of love so deep it nearly destroyed you. Because you're the strongest person I've ever met, and you don't even know it. Her breath caught. Avery, because when you smile, the whole world lights up, and I want to spend whatever time we have helping you smile. I'm terrified, she murmured. So am I. What if we're making a mistake? What if we're making the best decision of our lives? She held my gaze for a long moment. I watched her walls begin to crumble, fear loosening into something that looked a lot like hope. And then, slowly, Avery smiled. Not the tentative scared smile from the storm night. A real smile, full and bright and absolutely radiant. Okay, she whispered. Okay, let's try. I felt like I could fly. Really? Really? But Quinn. Yeah. Can we start slow? I'm out of practice at this whole feeling thing. I laughed, pulling her into a hug. We can start as slow as you want. Avery melted into my arms, and I felt her body relax for the first time since I'd known her. Thank you, she whispered against my shoulder. For what? For not giving up on me. For seeing something in me worth saving. Avery Sterling, you were never broke. Paused, waiting for the right moment to start living again. She pulled back to look at me, and her eyes were bright with tears and hope and something that looked a lot like love. I think, she said softly, I'd like to learn how to see color again. I think I'd like to teach you. And as we stood there in her office holding each other while the city sparkled below us, I realized something beautiful. Sometimes the best love stories aren't about finding someone perfect. They're about finding someone worth healing for, someone worth fighting for, someone worth learning to live again for. Avery reached up and touched my face gently. I haven't felt this scared in 10 years. Good scared or bad scared? Good scared? Like standing at the edge of a cliff and knowing you're about to jump, but trusting that someone will catch you. I'll catch you. I promised always. And I'll catch you, too. We kissed then, soft and tentative and full of promise. It tasted like coffee and tears and new beginnings. When we broke apart, Avery was crying again, but this time she was smiling too. Lila would have liked you, she said. You think so? I know. So, she always said I needed someone who could make me laugh, someone who could see the good in everything, even in grumpy CEOs. Especially in grumpy CEOs. We laughed together and the sound filled the office with warmth and light. So what now? Avery asked. Now we take it one day at a time. One smile at a time. One moment at a time. I like that plan. Good, because I have a lot of moments planned for us. Avery Sterling smiled at me. Really truly smiled. And I knew we were going to be okay. Because love, real love, isn't about avoiding the storm. It's about learning to dance in the rain together. 6 months later, Avery Sterling was photographed at a charity gala, laughing with her girlfriend, Quinn Hart. It was the first time anyone had seen the CEO smile in over a decade. When asked about the change, Avery simply said, I remembered what it feels like to be alive. And if you look closely at the photo, you can see it. The moment when a woman who thought she'd lost everything found something worth living for again. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us love always finds a way. And let me know in the comments what moment changed your life forever. On the Monday after the charity gala photo made the rounds, the building was louder than usual in the way silence can be loud, hushed whispers, quick glances, the rhythm of unasked questions. Ethan, the guy in the navy blazer who sees everything and says only what's needed, watched the morning unfold from my usual post across the marble foyer. The headline was on every phone, who is the woman at her side? The sub-headline had it almost right, Quinn Hart, former night janitor. The word former mattered. It would matter a lot in the months to come. Avery walked in at 7 a.m. sharp, as she always had, but everything else was new. At her right hand, a paper cup with a green marker looped into a heart, and, this was the real news, she paused in front of my desk. Morning, Ethan. She'd always given me professional nods that felt like signatures on invisible documents. Today she said my name, like a person, like a neighbor in the line at the deli. And, quiet as a moth's wing, the start of a smile lifted one corner of her mouth, as if the memory of last night was still on her tongue. Morning, Miss Sterling, I said, and then, because the old rules had shifted, good picture. She held my gaze, gray eyes mercurial. We donated $4 million from the match, not 3. Make sure the press team corrects that if they call down. Yes, ma'am. And Ethan? Yes, ma'am. The stain in conference B stays. It always does. She nodded, as if a covenant had been renewed, and stepped into the elevator. On the 47th, the doors closed on a woman who, 6 months ago, had looked through windows and seen only geometry. Now I had a feeling she saw the orange in the sunrise, and the pigeons, and the woman with the honey blonde ponytail who could make a room feel like a porch in summer. The board met that afternoon. My badge didn't get me through that walnut door, but the hall carried voices, the way wood carries old stories. HR implications, someone said. Optics, said another. Boundaries, said a third. What I know is what everyone in this building learns sooner or later. Beneath the steel, Avery is a strategist. That means she anticipates the hit, absorbs the impact, and pivots on purpose. When the door finally opened, I caught a glimpse, Avery seated at the head, shoulders square. Across from her, the chairwoman Margot Ellison, a woman with silver hair and a smile like a comma, soft until it becomes a period. Quinn wasn't there. Avery had asked her not to be. Later, I learned the shape of the deal. Quinn resigned from the facilities vendor that same day. Effective immediately, with severance she initially refused and then accepted only after Avery promised it had been arranged without her signature or say. HR put in writing what they called the line of daylight. Avery recused from any matter touching Quinn. The CFO and head of HR would jointly approve anything adjacent. It wasn't about hiding. It was about letting something honest grow where sunlight could reach it. Quinn spent a week not wearing a uniform. If you've ever spent a decade wearing a name on your chest and a key ring on your belt, you know what this feels like, freedom with a little vertigo. She texted me one afternoon from a cafe 2 blocks away. Do people sit this long over one croissant? Am I doing it wrong? There is no wrong croissant, I wrote back. She replied with a picture of a half-eaten crescent and a caption, Wonder achieved. That was the first word of the new chapter, wonder, and the second word was work. Not the same work. A different kind. People keep asking what I do, Quinn told Avery one night, halfway through a bowl of pasta so good it felt illegal. I know this because Avery told me later, in the plain-spoken way of someone practicing to say soft things out loud. What do you tell them? Avery asked, twirling noodles, eyes soft in the yellow light of her kitchen. Yes, she cooked now. Badly at first. Beautifully, later. The spoon tapping on the edge of the pot sounded like a door being opened. I say I help spaces remember how to hold people. Avery set her fork down. That's not an answer I can put on your LinkedIn. It's the only one that feels true. Avery smiled into her glass. Then let's make it a title. Spaces and People. Is that a department or a poem? Both, Avery said, and Quinn laughed, and in 100 small ways that laugh started redesigning the house that grief had built inside Avery and then locked from the inside. The formalities came later. A foundation first, the Lila Bennett Fund for Unexpected Joy, seeded from Avery's own stock and structured so it would outlive both of them. The grant application had 3 questions. 1. What ordinary thing will you make beautiful? 2. Who needs to feel seen? 3. How will the joy outlast the moment? No page limits. No corporate jargon. The board approved it unanimously after a single meeting spent crying quietly into linen handkerchiefs they pretended were for allergies. Then came the role no one knew how to name, because maybe it didn't exist yet. They called it Director of Hospitality and Places on paper. But whenever Quinn introduced herself in a conference room, she said, "Hi. I just try to make the building feel like a person who cares." That's the thing about titles. They fit bodies the way off-the-rack clothes do, close enough to be passable until a good tailor gets involved. Quinn tailored her title by doing what she had always done, replacing indifference with attention. She started with water and light, watering cans and open blinds, and then moved to policy, quiet rooms with soft chairs for the grief-struck, a hard 8 p.m. email stop, mental health stipends that didn't require an essay and an apology. She bought plants and taught the accounting team how not to kill them. She made the break rooms smell like cinnamon in December and fresh mint in June. She put a bench on every floor and called it Lila's bench, no plaque, just a piece of reclaimed wood that invited you to sit down and remember someone who taught you to look up. People did. They sat. And they looked up. Avery let her. More precisely, Avery learned how to let her. Power is a language people speak with their hands, and Avery's hands were used to signing and directing and stopping. It took practice to learn a new verb, opening. She fumbled it at first, the way you fumble a foreign word with a sound you've never made. Then her mouth learned the shape. The press did what the press does, barked and guessed and ran too fast. CEO falls for janitor was the cheap headline, and it stung Quinn like a winter hand on metal. The internet held for a week and then got hungry for something else. Avery's PR team drafted 3 statements, she didn't like any of them. Then she fired the statements and wrote her own. If you want to know what changed, it's simple. I remembered that companies are collections of human beings, not spreadsheets. A person I care about reminded me. Her name is Quinn. Please spell it correctly. Questions about her employment history are irrelevant and unkind. Questions about our charitable giving are welcome. We expect to be held to a higher standard. The blowback died the way storms do, loud, then quieter, then only a distant rumble you remember so you'll bring an umbrella next time. Margot Ellison, the chair, called it the most adult thing a public figure has said in months. Avery called it adequate and went back to work. But not the same work. Never the same. She started carrying cash for the first time in years because Quinn liked tipping people into unexpected smiles, the barista with the chipped nail polish, the garage attendant who kept a paperback on the stool. She bought a coat that wasn't black. She left for home, not residence, at 6 p.m. and meant it. When it rained, she stood by the window without bracing for news that would punch her through the glass. She learned to make pancakes that looked like countries. If you have not watched a billionaire fail at flipping a pancake and laugh with her whole mouth about it, you have not seen proof that the universe is trying to heal itself, one breakfast at a time. And on one particular Thursday, she didn't come in at 7. Or 8. Or 9. I asked no one why. The answer arrived at 10:12, in the form of a text from a number she'd only used twice, with emergencies, Ethan, please have a bouquet sent to 12E. Anything that looks like sunrise. I sent 2, because sometimes redundancy is love. At 3 p.m., she came in, hair damp, eyes bright. Fire drill? I asked lightly. Storm, she said, meaning the good kind, and glanced up at the glass ceiling. We watched. Hot chocolate? And marshmallows, she said, then lowered her voice, conspiratorial. I burned them, on purpose. She says that's the point. Point taken, I said. She pressed a second cup of coffee into my hand, black, the way she remembered I liked it, and went on her way. They built rituals the way you build a little city in the living room out of pillows, small walls, soft corners, a doorway no one else could see but you and the person who helped you lay the first cushion. Wednesday nights became wonder walks, no agenda, just blocks and blocks of looking. Saturdays were for Lila projects, anything that was messy and worth it, painting a wall a color neither of them had ever worn, baking a pie that caved a little in the middle and was better for the imperfection. Sundays were quiet breakfasts and the crossword in ink, because faith in your answers counts for something even when you're wrong. They kept a jar by the coffee machine labeled grief tax. Every time one of them said, "This is harder than it should be because someone I love is gone," they put $1 in the jar and didn't argue with the truth. Once a month they emptied the jar and split it between a hospice fund and a local diner's suspended coffee board. It never made the grief smaller. It made the world bigger around it. Avery started therapy again. She tried once, after the funeral, and quit when every chair felt like a witness instead of a welcome. Years later, with Quinn's hand on her knee, she opened the door a second time. The therapist had a laugh like a door chime and the good sense not to turn sorrow into an assignment. They talked about storms. They talked about roads that split where no map indicated. They talked about the difference between memorial and mausoleum. The therapist handed her a single sentence that stuck to the wall of her days. Adjustment isn't betrayal. Avery wrote it on a sticky note and hid it behind a picture frame the way children hide talismans under loose floorboards. Quinn joined a grief group, too, sat in a circle of chairs that had learned the shape of collapse and listened hard to other people's sentences. She never told the room she was dating a CEO. The room never asked. That's the cathedral of those circles. You leave your biography at the door, and you carry out everybody's story like a candle cupped in your palm. They told each other things they didn't know how to say to anyone else. Quinn confessed to feeling unsteady sometimes in Avery's world, tall rooms, quiet servers, nameplates that weighed as much as clocks. I grew up in diners, she said. Grease and grin. Sometimes I miss smelling like French fries when I get home. Sometimes I miss smelling like copier toner, Avery said dryly. Because it meant the work was small enough to touch. Let's touch work, then, Quinn said. And she drew little projects around the edges of Avery's day, a napkin by the desk chair with a list titled, "Good Things We Did," a microgrant to a clinic. A raise for a receptionist, a plant that didn't die. A pocket-sized Polaroid taped inside the drawer, their shoes side by side at the welcome mat. There was a moment everyone remembers because everyone was there. Quarterly town hall, auditorium full. Avery used to do these like a cold front, facts, graphs, wind chill. This one began the same way, and then, at minute 27, she closed the leather folder and stepped away from the lectern. I need to say something that isn't on the slide, she said, and even the HVAC listened. She told them, in irreducible sentences, about the 10 years. She said Lila's name and didn't look away from the first row when she did. She told them about the coffee stain and how it stayed. She told them she had learned to smile again and then, just like that, she smiled into 100 faces and made the building a little warmer by doing it. Someone in the back stood first, then the front, then all of us. I clapped until my hands stung. Afterward, she found me near the side exit, the place where I pretend to be invisible and am always seen. How was that? She asked, almost shy. Factual, I said. She raised an eyebrow. And beautiful. She nodded, one of those tiny nods that used to mean proceed, but now meant thank you. A minute later Quinn appeared at her shoulder and slid 2 fingers into her hand like you'd slide a bookmark into a well-loved page. No announcement, no flourish. Just a promise not to lose their place. The building exhaled around them, because whether anyone says it or not, a company is a climate, and the weather had changed. Quinn met Lila's parents in May. It wasn't a test. It felt like one. They flew on a Friday and drove the rest of the way with the windows down, the way you do when you are trying to prepare the air in your lungs for the air in a room that made your person who your person is. The house had an old maple in front and a wind chime that made grief sound almost like music. Lila's mother, Elaine, a retired school librarian with wrists like saplings, opened the door first and said, "You must be the woman who finally got her to eat breakfast on Sundays." "Trying," Quinn said, and was pulled into an embrace that could have been a shield if it wasn't so clearly a welcome. Lila's father, Victor, eyes soft behind readers, took Avery's face in his hands the way you do when you are making sure a dream has come true at last. After a dinner of baked ziti and stories that knocked the breath out of the room and then gave it back again, remember the zoo, remember the penguins. Do you remember the scarf? They stood on the porch and watched a storm that thought about coming and then decided to go around. Later, Elaine pressed a small wrapped parcel into Avery's hands. "She left this in the back of our closet," she said. "You didn't feel ready when we found it." Avery nodded. She knew the parcel. A letter, sealed with the kind of courage only the dying and the completely honest own. She had not been ready, no. She had been a person you couldn't approach with a match. Now, with Quinn on the couch and a quilt across their knees, she slid a finger under the flap and read. "Lovers deserve some privacy. I won't put the letter here. I will tell you 2 lines. Because they were the hinges on which every door opened afterward, please don't build a monument out of my absence. If there is another who can hand you a mug and make you laugh at burnt toast, let her." Avery put the page back in the envelope. Eyes focused on something just above the window. When she finally looked at Quinn, her face was that new thing, grief and grace, same house, different rooms. "I can breathe," she said simply. "I know," Quinn said, simple back. On the flight home, Avery fell asleep against Quinn's shoulder. Somewhere over the dark, they crossed a private border no map could show. They took their first vacation in August. It rained 2 days of the 5. They celebrated each. The zoo in their new city had penguins. They stood there longer than you'd think adults would, watched birds in little suits perform their tiny economies of love, steal a pebble, gift a pebble, call, answer. At some point, Quinn put a smooth white stone in Avery's pocket. "For the nest," she said. "Which nest?" Avery asked. "Anyone we decide is ours." On the 3rd day, they woke early and drove to a region where the leaves had not yet started their annual miracle. "We'll come back when they flame out," Quinn said, and Avery said, "Deal," and they made a note in a shared calendar titled Color Safaris. That night, they ate ice cream from paper cups on a dock and watched the moon crumple the lake. Avery was wearing a sweatshirt with a tiny embroidered whale and a look that would have gotten her fired from her old idea of who she had to be. They came back and returned to work and found the office changed in ways no contractor could bid. The coffee machine got a second carafe labeled decaf for big feelings. The HR portal added a drop-down that said, "I'm going through something and can't find the words yet." When you selected it, an automatic note went to your manager, "Be kind, don't pry." Strangers held doors a beat longer. Someone started a lunchtime walking club that turned into a moving confessional for people who had never used words for certain aches before. If you think I'm exaggerating, you haven't watched a building forget its first language, hurry, hush, and start speaking a kinder one. The Lila Bennett Fund made small grants with big echoes, a hospital cafeteria that added free coffee before dawn. A public school that put a shelf of clean socks by the nurse's office. A bus stop that got a bench with a little roof that looked like a hat. We drove around on my days off just to see them, me, because I like to note the places where good choices have been made. Quinn, because she likes to stand near solutions and breathe in. On the anniversary of the storm that locked them on the 47th floor, they recreated the fort. Candles, couch cushions, contraband pretzels. They spread a blanket on the carpet, soft, blue, and stayed late, careful not to panic the night guard, me. "Permission?" Avery texted at 7:12. "You know the rules," I wrote. "No fireworks. No cartwheels. Leave the stain. What about marshmallows? Bring extra." I pretended to patrol other floors and did not notice how they sat with their backs against the glass, foreheads touching, saying nothing because nothing needed saying. When they packed up, the room smelled like sugar and smoke and the first day of a new year. "Ethan," Avery called softly before they left, "could you?" "I'll lock up," I said. The 2 of them pressed thanks into my hand in the form of a foil-wrapped square still warm. "Security tax," Quinn said. "Grief tax has better branding," I replied, and Quinn made a note to fix that, unless the imperfection was the point. The proposal, when it came, wasn't in a box. It didn't happen in a restaurant, a helicopter, or a press release. It happened on a Tuesday morning, in a fog so dense it felt like the city had been erased and was being sketched back in. Avery set 2 mugs on the kitchen table. One red here. The other red now. She'd bought them at a lakeside shop where a dog slept on the counter and nobody pretended not to cry when the right song drifted out of the radio. Are those the vows? Quinn teased, hair looped up, pajama shirt half unbuttoned, eyes carrying the kind of tired you earn by living fully. They could be, Avery said. She drew an envelope from the fruit bowl, a terrible hiding place, which, Quinn insisted, made it perfect, and slid it across the table. Inside, a printed page in lawyerly type. Title, Amendment to the Existing Agreement. Subheading, Partnership Terms. Quinn looked up, laughter already rising. Is this a proposal or a merger? Yes, Avery said, then faltered. Poetry wasn't her native tongue, though she was learning. It's a request. For a future contract. Open terms. No expiry. Generous severance, if ever necessary. She swallowed. I'd like to spend the rest of my life learning how to stand beside you when it rains and when it doesn't. Quinn flipped to the last page. 2 signature lines for them, and one more, italicized, for Joy, as witness. Quinn signed Joy with a theatrical flourish, then kissed it like a soap opera notary. And what does Joy get? Everything, Avery said. Then yes, Quinn answered, before Avery could offer the ring she'd been turning in her palm for 3 days. It was simple and round, warm from being held. Quinn offered her hand and didn't look away as Avery set the promise where everyone could see it, most of all themselves. They married in October beneath a ginkgo that let fall coins of light as the wind moved through. 10 people. 2 benches. 1 song, their living room dance track with the claps and the horns. Margot cried like a surprised child. Paula cheered like a fan whose team finally got a roster with heart. Lila's parents held hands. The therapist mailed a postcard that read, witnessed from afar. I stood by the rental heater, pretending to mind the extension cord, and memorized the way the tree spun sunlight into gold confetti. Avery's vows refused preciousness. I don't promise to be unafraid, she said, steady. Only to be honest about the fear, and to hold yours with as much care as I ask you to hold mine. Quinn said. I promise to look for color with you on days it's hard to see, and to admit when I've forgotten how. They both said. Coffee, and the crowd laughed, like a bell rung in a chapel that didn't need a roof to feel holy. They kept the rings simple and the reception simpler, shortbread, strawberries, and the kind of sparkling wine that feels like tiny applause on the tongue. They danced to the 1 song, then another, then a third, and when the sky briefly opened and speckled everyone's shoulders with small wet coins, no one ran. A year later, 2, 3, the building and the people in it had new reflexes. Meetings began with a shared breath. Deadlines stopped feeling like cliffs and became bridges with handrails. The security desk got a bowl of dog treats because clients started bringing their dogs when they figured out no one would mind, and because every office is better with a beagle on a Wednesday. Paula from accounting stopped apologizing for needing 5 minutes to cry on Lila's bench when her mother's test results came back ambiguous. A junior developer put a framed print by the elevator, "You made it here. Good job." No one took it down. The coffee stain in Conference B did not fade. Carpet shampoos came and went. It stayed a pale ring, like a moon you see out of the corner of your eye. New hires are told the story at orientation, it's a map. It leads to the part of the company where we remember to be people. When someone asks, why not replace the carpet? An old-timer, sometimes me, says, some stains tell you where the good story is. You don't paint over a child's growth chart. The Lila Bennett Fund outgrew its first office by spring. Grants went to a mobile laundromat that parked near encampments. To a clinic that hired a violinist to play in the waiting room on Thursdays. To a florist who taught a class on making centerpieces from weeds and wishes. Every year on the anniversary of their first coffee, Avery and Quinn added a new category, surprise someone. The application instructions were perfect, tell us who, why, and how. Don't ask permission. Ask forgiveness if you must. Send us a picture. We like pictures. There were hard days, still. Grief didn't pack its suitcase and move out. It politely knocked now, asked if it could sleep on the couch for a few nights. When the old ache flared, an anniversary, a date on a calendar that had to be turned past carefully, one of them would put a 3rd mug by the coffee machine. For Lila, Quinn would say, and Avery would kiss her on the hairline, and the day would be gentle with them both in a way it had not been for years. There were fights, too, the ordinary kind that prove you're in a real relationship and not an illustrated fable. Are we home too late too often? Why is the laundry a mountain and not a hill? Do we need to RSVP no more? They learned to end arguments sitting down, feet touching, not standing like counsel for the prosecution. They said sorry with both words and chores. They learned to ask not, are you okay? Which can feel like a test, but, how can I love you well today? Which is an invitation into specificity, hold my hand, take my phone away, tell me the duck story again. They told the duck story a lot. It went like this: on their second wonder walk, they found a duck in a puddle on the roof because the wind had blown the gutter water into a small, perfect lake. Sometimes life is a rooftop puddle, Quinn said. And sometimes it's enough. That's it. That's the story. It never stops being funny. If you need a finite ending for your ledger, take this one. 5 years from the day Quinn hummed through a lobby that had forgotten it was allowed to echo. The city dedicated a small triangular pocket park on the corner by the cafe with the dog on the counter. It had 2 benches and a ginkgo sapling and a sign cut into steel: find something ordinary. Choose to see it as beautiful. Share. People took pictures with it and tagged their photos with a little coffee cup emoji and the rain cloud and a yellow heart. I go by on my lunch breaks and watch people read the sign. There's always one who mouths the word share like a vow. If you want a warmer ending, use this one: the night their daughter took her first steps. Yes. A daughter, but that's another chapter, and no, I won't tell it without her permission. They were in the kitchen and the radio was playing the horn song and Quinn had jam on her cheek and Avery had flour on her eyebrow, and there, between the island and the fridge, a person let go of the table and walked into their hands. The floor was sticky with honey. No one minded. Later, Avery pointed to the faint crescent of a jam stain on the sleeve of her sweater and said, "We're going to keep that, right?" Quinn said, "Obviously. If you prefer something smaller. Because endings are made of small things, try this." This morning, years after the photo that started this epilogue, I watched them cross the lobby together. Quinn had a paper crane made from a receipt tucked behind her ear. Avery had 2 coffees and the relaxed shoulders of a person who has learned to move through weather without bracing for loss at every fresh gust. They made a beeline for the elevator. And would have gone up without a word to anyone if not for the Beagle, Scout, remember, who wriggled its way between Quinn's ankles. She bent, laughed, handed the paper crane to the dog's human, and said, "For luck." Avery pressed a cup into my hand and said, "For security." I said, "For joy," and none of us needed to say the rest. The elevator doors closed on their backs. The building, which comes alive when its people are kind, hummed. What stays? The stain stays. The bench stays. The way the evening light turns the 47th floor windows into an obituary for the day that is never sad stays. The 3rd mug some morning stays. The habit of buying 2 coffees, one for you and one for the person you haven't met yet who will need it, stays. The understanding that a company becomes whatever the most powerful person in the room is brave enough to be, this stays, too. And the smile. This is the fact anyone who works here can testify to under oath: the smile stays. Not all day. Not every day. Not without cost. But reliably, the way sunrise can be relied on color by color, even when it's behind a kind of cloud that looks like grief at first until you realize it's simply weather, and weather passes. If you asked me to tell you the difference between the woman I used to watch through glass and the one who stopped something fierce and warm in my chest now, I'd say this: Avery learned that love didn't erase what came before, it taught her how to carry it without breaking her own ribs. She learned to teach the building the same thing: carry together, breathe together, remember together, repair together. She learned that joy is not evidence you have forgotten, it is proof you remember and chose to live anyway. On my desk there is a Polaroid Quinn left last winter, me, standing in front of the security monitors, grim as ever, holding up a donut someone shoved at me. On the back she wrote, "Ethan, thanks for keeping the lights steady while we figured out the weather. Q&A, keep it under the blotter. Some days the building is quiet enough I forget it's there. Some days the city roars and I slide the picture out and look at it and remember that every story with 2 coffees on page 1 deserves an ending where the cups don't run dry. Before you go, one last image: night. The conference room where the coffee stained the carpet. The city in the windows like a galaxy that forgot to stay skyside. Two women sit on the floor. One rests her head on the other's shoulder. Their hands are linked, steady. On the table beside them, 3 mugs. This is not a triangle, it is a continuum. What was, what is still to come. Outside, a storm considers arriving, then changes its mind. Inside, they dance anyway, small, swaying, barefoot, on the spot where everything fell apart and began at once. They are not avoiding rain. They do not fear getting wet. They know what you and I know now: some stains are worth keeping. Some storms teach you your true steps. And when you choose to see the ordinary as beautiful and share it, color doesn't merely return. It stays.